everyone. Welcome to Telling Tall Tales the Right Way. I am your host, Heather Ostianbi. I am the editor of several best-selling adult nonfiction books, as well as dozens of children's books, which, they're just amazing and delightful. I am a reporter, editor, writer, ghostwriter, and a certified master storyteller. And so today, we're going to focus on it. Now, this is a New York Times bestseller. I had never heard of it. Not that that means anything, but I love books, so I'm all into books. But one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this book is I feel like it's particularly timely, given the way that women's role in American society has continued to evolve over the years, and we're kind of at a junction right now. And I know this is not a show about political, but I just really want you to understand that books and reading is a political move, especially because education can be suppressed, and women for a really long time, especially non-white women, were we were punished for being knowledgeable. And that's really what this book is about. So what we're talking about today is The Once and Future Witches by Alix E. Harrow. Now it's a hefty book. One of the things I like about it, this is just an aesthetic thing for me, but like the pages are uneven. So it's like, feels a little more old timey, I guess. I don't know. I like that. For me, it's just a thing. But really what this book is about is ferocious, powerful women who are constantly having a boot of male patriarchy, white male patriarchy, on their necks all the time, and they refuse to give in. And that is yes, there's magic, because in this world, magic is real. Now, let me tell you, this takes place in America in 1893. That's when it starts. But it's like kind of an alternative America. And so witches were always considered real, not just women who knew how to heal, like, women who were burned at the stake in the American history as we know it, and have been denigrated for centuries for knowing how to heal things and doing basically that men thought should be their purview only. But in this book, witchcraft was an actual thing where women were working spells, and yes, but still doing all the things that women do: heal, deliver babies, understand the workings of herbs and all of that sort of thing. But witchcraft for real is in this book, is part of the storyline. So it takes place in a town called New Salem, because the original Salem, the Salem that we know from our history books, has been burned to the ground. And it's really haunting, because one of the characters eventually makes a sojourn to the original Salem, and she can feel the spirits of all the women who have been murdered there. And apparently the town was razed completely, and the ash is ankle deep. So it really, when I was reading those passages, it fills you with kind of like a chill. But anyway, let's start from the beginning. Okay. We open in 1893. We are walking along with James Juniper. Okay, I had to look up their, like, James. These are the Eastwood sisters. So, like, remember that movie, The Witches of Eastwood? There's a lot of plays on things in this book, which I will get to after we go through like the basic premise. Okay, so we have James Juniper Eastwood. She is the youngest of three sisters. The oldest girl or young woman is Agnes Amaranth Eastwood. The middle daughter is Beatrice Belladonna Eastwood. Now, they are known primarily, Beatrice is known as Bella, short for her middle name. James Juniper is known as June, and Agnes Amaranth, they just call her Agnes. But the reason why they have these unusual middle names is So juniper, amaranth, and belladonna, those are all plants, but they're also considered mother's names. So James, Agnes, and Beatrice are like their, not necessarily their father's names, but like just their normal out in the world names. And then witches always have a mother's name. And what this book does is it really defines communities of women and how things are passed down through matrilineal. It's a matrilineal progression. And so almost every woman has a mother's name. That's her middle name. Other characters who are equally important to the story are Cleopatra Laveau Quinn. Now, she is a Black woman, and her mother is Marie Laveau Quinn. Now, if anybody knows anything about New Orleans and voodoo history, Marie Laveau is considered the voodoo queen, who was steeped in magic and tradition. And there's still debate over whether or not she actually died. But I've been to her family tomb in New Orleans. I've seen her home, and there is an energy around them. I'm not going to lie, there is. It's interesting. But anyway, back to the book. Okay. And then we have Gideon Hill. He's the big villain. He's the mayor of New Salem, and he is fanatical about destroying witchcraft. Now, as you all know by now, this show is full of spoilers because we're talking about it all. So if this is a book that you haven't read and you kind of want to, then I'm just going to tell you, be prepared. Now, if you're like me and you don't mind spoilers, because for me, it just makes it even more enticing to go read something or watch something, then let's just go. Okay, here we are. Once and Future Witches opens in 1893, which is the suffragist movement in America is really gaining steam. And so that's where we open. That's kind of the crux to get the first half of the story going. So what happens in the beginning is we find out that the sisters have been estranged for 7 years. And we learn later about like the truth behind their estrangement and not what they thought was the reason for the separation. But the sisters have been separated for 7 years. June has been living on their, at the risk of sounding stereotypical, the way it's described in the book is it sounds very much like maybe in Appalachia. That's where they lived. And he's an abusive drunk. Her sisters left home. She, of course, harbors deep resentment for them leaving her with their dad, and she was only 10. Now, their grandmother, their mom died giving birth to June. So they were basically raised with their father, but their maternal grandmother lives in a small hut, like it's on the property. Let's just say it's on the property. And she is a deeply magical being, deeply magical. She teaches them everything they need to know. And what this is what they refer to a lot of as the words and the ways. So if you have the words and you have the ways, and it could be something simple like a feather and a crystal in your pocket, or I'm pointing to my pocket. You can't see me pointing at my pocket. But it could be something simple like that. Or maybe they have a stick and a twig and something else. But if you have the right words with those ways, now you can work simple magic spells. Which, just historically speaking, I would just like to say, I read something, and I should have looked it up for this episode, and I did not. But I read something a while ago, and time is fluid, so I'm not really sure when that was. But all women's dresses used to come with pockets. Like all of our dresses used to come with pockets. And then they stopped making dresses with pockets because they didn't like women keeping things in their pockets. They associated that with what? Say it with me, witchcraft. So they got rid of our pockets. Anyway, that's why we're all so delighted now when everybody's like, I like your dress. And we're like, yay, it has pockets. That is why. Anyway, so Their father dies. June is 17 now. She comes to New Salem. She, for some reason, is drawn to this square, like the town square. And she feels this cat crackling energy. And it turns out her sisters are there. She doesn't know this. Her sisters are there. And somehow them being there together has conjured this tower to appear kind of out of nowhere, which of course freaks everyone out. But what we come to learn is that the tower was the center of power, of witchcraft power. There's the books and everything you would need to know in hundreds of languages from around the world, communities and cultures from all which ways of the earth are in this tower, and they've been collected here. And the tower is still it's inhabited by the ghosts of 3 women who represent Maiden, Mother, Crone. And as you can guess, the sisters also represent that. Maiden, Mother, Crone. Oh wait, Bella's the oldest. I'm sorry. Bella's the oldest. Agnes is the middle kid. Bella is older and unmarried, so she's considered the crone. Agnes has this on off again thing with this dude. She gets pregnant and then tells him to kind of flutter off. And then June is the maiden, right? So now we have the 3 sisters also represent. Oh, that sun is very bright in my face. But we're just, well, hold on. Let me close this curtain. Okay. Better? Okay. Anyway. So that's what happens. They converge. They don't know what's happening. Where'd this tower come from? Oh my God, what's going on? Now, Bella has a job. She's working in the New Salem library. So she has access to all this research material. That's how she meets Cleopatra Quinn. And this I found interesting since it's the late 19th century, not exactly a bastion of open-minded thinking in America. Women are still very much second-class citizens, non-white Americans, even less. So now we have Cleopatra come in. She's a Black woman. Her and Bella hit it off. They embark on a romance, which I thought was an interesting thing to include. Not that it didn't happen in real life, but the overall acceptance of everyone for it was very more, I felt 21st century than maybe 19th century, but what do I know? I didn't live back then. But it also brings us to a knowledge, of course, of a whole non-white community that exists in New Salem, right? They have their own neighborhood, they have their own shops, they have their own restaurants. Like it's a thriving Black community amongst the white community of New Salem. And of course, there is an entire witch community also in there. Okay, so now we're in the suffragist movement. And they want women's right to vote. But June is like, what are you talking about? We're just going to try for the right to vote, but we're powerful. Like there was a whole tower. Did you not see the tower? Like we could be so much more powerful than this. And everybody's like, yo, you need to slow your roll because you A, are 17 and don't know anything. And B, we'd like to keep our heads. Thanks. We'd rather not hang in the town square. Anyway, as I'm sure you can guess, the sisters come together. They do not, of course, bring about women's suffrage because that still does happen later in the 20th century. But they start to make the presence of powerful women as witches known to society. And of course, people freak out. Gideon Hill, in particular, has a major problem with this. Now, what I also found interesting about this book, and I'm sorry, I keep holding it because I really like these pages, but it's so good. It's really good. It's one of those where you're like, I'm just going to read one more chapter. And then the next thing you know, it's 2 hours later. And where you started here, now you're suddenly here, right? But what I found interesting is that the author takes popular, well-known Grimm's fairy tales and rhymes, right? So let me go with the fairy tales first. So instead of it being the Brothers Grimm, it's the Sisters Grimm. And so all the fairy tales are kind of flipped on their head a little bit. And so instead of being like from a masculine standpoint, it's now from a very feminine standpoint, strong, fierce feminine, to be sure. But also they take, like nursery rhymes, like, tell me your tale and tell it true. Cross my heart and hope to die. Strike me down if I lie. Now, how many of us said something similar as kids, right? Like we would sing song that, right? I don't know. I don't remember it. But anyway, but she's taking these rhymes that we all know from our childhood, and she's using them as vehicles to tell the story. So this is at the start of chapter 13. Tell your tale and tell it true. Cross my heart and hope to die. Strike me down if I lie. And it says, a spell for secrets kept and told, requiring bindweed and blood, right? So there's something about, there's all these things. So those are the words, and then the ways are the material. So here's another one, chapter 9. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Yours to mine and mine to yours. A spell to bind, requiring a tight stitch and a steady hand. And so each chapter kind of focuses on that theme, not necessarily the spell, although it is included in here. But anyway, I just found that to be one of the most unique aspects of a novel I've read in a really long time. Okay, back to the story. Gideon Hill wants the Eastwood sisters caught and punished. Punished? Yes, death. That's what he wants. He wants them hung publicly to make it very plain that witchcraft was a scourge in Old Salem, and it will not be tolerated in New Salem. Right? So now he's on like this manhunt. Anyway, the sisters end up leaving the suffragist movement because the suffragists, they're not willing to put their necks out like that, both figuratively and literally. And so the second half of the book transitions into how the sisters kind of come together to form their own kind of society, similar to the suffragists, but it's really about female empowerment and witch empowerment is really what it comes down to. We find out, the reason why the tower is so important, obviously it has all these books that have all this knowledge in it. And at some point, the tower actually, they say there's this spell that they can do, and it exhausts them, right? It saps their energy. But they bring the tower to New Salem, and it is attacked by Gideon and all these men, and they burn it as much as they can before the sisters can make it, poof, again, like go away. Come to find out, Gideon is actually also a witch, and he's hundreds of years old. Like he found out how to, and it's very dark, horrible magic that does this. So there's cautionary tales in it too, right? Like you have to be, it's kind of like that Spider-Man, the thing that Uncle Ben tells Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. And Gideon has abused his for hundreds of years by somehow making his soul, like his soul can slither out of his body and then go into another body. So he's just been using these bodies for hundreds of years. And he wants to destroy any other witches because he wants to be the most powerful. He can enchant people. He can almost kind of compel people. It's a very weird-ish kind of thing where he's accumulated all this power over the years. Anyway, so, it all builds. The sisters are on the run. Agnes has her baby. She finds love with a guy who's like also, and then at the same time, Agnes was working in a factory, and now there's the whole movement for unions, right? So now we have violence on several fronts. Oh, look, there's Walter. We have violence on several fronts against the women, the witches, and then against these men who want, they and men and women in factories who are pulling together to unionize so that their rights are protected, their safety is in, and they're making the money that they're supposed to make, all of these things. Anyway, she finds love with him. Bella finds love with Cleopatra. June is like, ugh, whatever, you two, I'm on a mission. They are together though. There is a little bit of a fracturing in the second half of the book, but then they come back together. And it culminates in this. They're going to burn, I think it's June. They're going to burn, is it Bella? I can't remember now. Doesn't matter. One of the sisters is actually going to be burned at the stake publicly because she's been caught. Oh, it's June. She's been caught. The Bella and Agnes, her older sisters, figure out that they figure out a way to get her out of the situation. But then Gideon, something happens to his corporeal body and his soul slithers out, and June sees it happening, and he has marked Agnes's daughter as his next body. And June is like, absolutely not happening. So somehow she wrestles Gideon's soul and he takes over her body. Now, Agnes and Bella are like, oh my God, we have to save our sister. Except June is like, yeah, I got this. And she walks to the pyre and allows the flames to engulf her. She doesn't scream. She doesn't do anything. Gideon screams. Gideon's soul is screaming. This is the only way to destroy him. And so at the end, Agnes and Bella are still on the run. They are still equipping women with words and ways so that women can take back power in tiny ways, whether it's to keep their husbands and sons from taking full advantage of like female servitude or getting a better working condition at work, whatever it is, right? They empower women. They remain on the run because the government by now is like, oh yeah, witches are really bad. And after what we just saw happening, like we definitely can't have that. So they're on the run, and June has now become one of the caretakers of the tower, despite it being mostly destroyed. So the tower exists both of and out, like both of this world and not of this world. It's a thing, but I don't know. It's kind of a back and forth thing, and I wasn't sure how I really felt about that. But in the end, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief about it. But what I really loved about this book is, number one, it builds the world so that when we are plopped into these people's lives, we have a full understanding of the technology available, the working conditions that were happening amongst the poor and working poor, how the rich differentiated themselves, and how the women's suffragist movement, especially, it's got a very sharp depiction of how it is really only for upper class white women, period. They don't want lower class white women, definitely don't want women of color in there. It describes the World's Fair, like they go to the World's Fair and cause a scene there to make it known that witches are here and we are not going away. The style of dress that they're wearing, it's all very, it's drawn so well that you feel like you're walking in the streets. Like maybe you can smell the ick of the factories. And then you can, be in the library with Bella and feel the calm that she feels being amongst books, right? Or how Agnes only feels like she comes alive when she feels her baby move inside of her, or when she's helping other women with their words and ways, right? The characters also so well done. And while Cleopatra might feel like a secondary character, and she kind of is because the story is really based on the three sisters, she is also so well defined, and her character growth helped, of course, by the love and understanding of her family, the community that she's from, which helps inform the reader oh, okay, well, she's attached to powerful magic that is ancestrally as strong or stronger than the magic of the Eastwood sisters. And I really appreciated the overall spirit of sisterhood that comes in, not just amongst the sisters, because, you know, they're sisters, but amongst women who want to pull together, women who want to make their lives better and make their children's lives better, and not just in the way, and not just have them continue to live these cycles, right? It's a tale as old as time. We all want what's best for our kids. How do we make that happen? In this book, it's about women's empowerment through witchcraft, and every woman has the opportunity to be a witch as long as they have the words and the ways. And so anyway, I'm going to leave it there. It was just, I can't read this book. Read this book. Okay? Read it. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope that you have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're catching this. But anyway, take care, and thank you as always for joining me, and I will see you next week. I'm not sure what we're going to be talking about next week. But I also, okay, so I have the conversation with Dwan Johnson about Shogun, which again, on Hulu, if you haven't watched it, do that. I have a 2-part conversation with our very own Dr. Tachi about Queen Charlotte. Amazing. I have a 2-part conversation with Cindy Rodriguez Constable about Paradise, which just wrapped its freshman season on Hulu, and it was so good. Okay. And then, yes, it's just amazing. Okay. Anyway, I'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone. Take care.